today, and the purpose of today's session is really to go through the ProBeta product, explain what we have, how it can help you to comply with ISQM1, and for those of you who have already purchased it, to then explain to you how to work with it, how to complete these documents, right? Because there has been some questions in terms of especially the risk document. And then I can go and edit this session and load it on the hub. And for everyone who did not attend it, at least they can listen to the recording on the hub as well. Okay. So first off, for those of you who may not have purchased our product yet, but may be looking into doing so, to find the product, you can just go to our ProBeta website. That's bookings.probetatraining.co.za, or you can just Google ProBeta training. I'm sure it would pop up. And then you need to go to the button Practice Management Hub. So it is sitting with all our other products for practice management. Right? We have a big hub, ISQM1 implementation hub, that is 7,000. But please note this hub includes all our other manuals as well. So if you are utilizing all our manuals, the HR manual, the training policies manual, the POPI and PIA manual, those type of things, then it would. Okay, so as I was explaining, we have 3 different products. We have the big product, which includes all our manuals, the ISQM toolkit, as well as the HR manuals, the POPI manuals, the PIA manuals, whichever one it is that you would. Well, if you are using all of our manuals, I would suggest to purchase that one. It is cheaper. It is about 50% of the price than if you were to purchase all the manuals individually. But all the manuals are available there individually in any case. But then we have the ISQM toolkit, which we're going to look at today. And exactly everything that's included in this toolkit is also included in the big manual, the 7,000 Rand one, as part of the ISQM toolkit included there. And that is 2,800. And then we have the risk document, which is only the Excel risk document. I'll show it to you in a moment, and I'll explain when we get there that you can purchase it separately. And that is 860 Rand. Okay. So those are the options, and this is where you can order them. Now, the toolkit, we have created it to ensure that using the documents within it, you can then implement a system of quality management. So please note that complying with ISQM1, it's not just about purchasing a manual, downloading it from here, putting it on your network, and then thinking that you are compliant. You need to implement a system of management. So the documents that we provide you with is going to assist you in implementing that system, but the documents itself isn't the system, right? You need to go and work through these documents and edit and tailor them and possibly add to them to create the system. Okay. So what the standard requires you to have in place, what the standard requires you to document is quite a few things. Number one, it requires you to have a risk assessment. And this is the big change from ISQC1. So a risk assessment process where you evaluate for your firm, for each objective and each component within ISQM1, why your firm may not achieve that objective. And then based on those risks, implement responses. So that's what the risk document goes through. The risk document gives you the objective. It gives you some guidance in terms of the risk assessment that we will look at, and then it requires you to implement a response. That response will then be your policy and procedure. So those responses then needs to be documented into a manual, right? It doesn't have to be a Word manual like we are providing you with. Right? You just need somewhere you need to document all your responses. So even if you just document it on the risk assessment document, it will be sufficient. But in terms of communication within your firm, to make it easier to communicate with the rest of the firm, it is recommended that you put those policies and procedures in an actual Word manual. We have 2 options for you available there. It's the one big, and I'll show you the big manual, which provides quite a lot of guidance. And then a smaller manual if you only want a summary of the policies and procedures. Okay, so we were talking about what is required to implement the system. We talked about the risk document. We talked about the ISQM1 manual itself that you need, that we do recommend, and then the resources. So for each response, you need to prove how it was implemented. And for that purposes, we've provided you with resources for each and every component there per component. So for each component, if the risk document says you need to complete a independence declaration, under ethics, we have provided you with an independence declaration. Naturally, some of the documents we can't provide you with, it will be internal documents. So for instance, where the risk document would refer to your HR policies and procedures. That's your own internal HR policies and procedures. So you will then need to reference to that. Okay. If the response is to report to IRBA under your own internal reporting procedures, you need to reference to your own internal reporting procedures. So that's the basic of the product, the risk assessment, the manual, and then all of the resources. So I'm going to start with the risk assessment document because that's the foundation of the product. That's the start of the product. And this is important that all firms complete the risk assessment document. Whether you're big, whether you're small, this is a must. You can probably skip out on some of the other documents in this toolkit, but the risk assessment is the core. There's two documents there. One is an Excel, one is a Word. The Word document is the requirements that ISQM1 requires you to consider to obtain an understanding of your firm. So to help you in your risk assessment, you need to consider the following characteristics of your firm, the type of clients you have, the type of engagements you have, the type of legislation you need to comply with. Right. You can document it in this document in 2.2, or you can document in the risk assessment documents. I'm going to show you in a moment. But it's important to be aware of the things that you need to consider. Okay. So this document isn't that important. The same considerations can be documented in the risk assessment itself. So let me open the risk assessment and explain this document to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can see how this product works. We provide you with the documents online. You download them. You will have to edit it for your firm, and then you will need to implement it in your firm, save it on your network. So the online platform that we provide you with is only to give you access to these documents. So you can't upload the completed documents again and save it on that portal, on that profile. Unfortunately, we are not opting in to do that because then we need to have extra storage space and then POPI becomes applicable and a few other things. So it's just easier to say, well, here's the product, edit it on your side, save it on your side. Okay. So let's look at the risk document. You will see for the risk document, we have all of the components here at the bottom. There's governance and leadership, ethical requirements, acceptance and continuance, engagement performance, resources, information and communication. So all 6 practical components that needs to be implemented is there. And then for the risk assessment component, that is per sheet. You will go and document the risk per sheet. That is the orange fields. So if you open up any of these sheets and you zoom out, you will see that there are orange fields and green fields. The orange fields are the risk assessment fields. The green fields are the monitoring fields. Okay, so risk assessment and monitoring takes place in this document for each and every component. So this is why I said this is the foundation, this is the crux of your ISQM system. Because basically in this document, you identify what your system of quality management be, you say how you implement it, and you monitor it. For very, very small firms, let's say you don't have any employees, it's just you, a sole proprietor. I would say this risk assessment document could be your system. Then you don't need the manual, the Word manual, right? Because the Word manual, as I said, it's not compulsory, it's more recommended for communication purposes. So I would be more than happy if you said, I'm a sole proprietor, I've documented all my responses in this document, I'm going to follow these responses. I don't have an actual separate manual of policies and procedures. Okay. Right. So let's look at each of these components and how we then document this risk assessment. So ladies and gentlemen, looking at how we do this risk assessment, and the process is the same for each and every component. So please take note, I'm not going to go through each and every component in detail. I'm just going to explain the process. In the heading at the top, you will see that we have provided a lot of guidance, right? So it's important to read the guidance. So first off, we start with the quality objective. The quality objectives are provided by the standard, and we've worked through this. We are of the opinion that you don't necessarily need to create additional quality objectives. If you use those provided by the standards, it should be sufficient to identify all your risks and to create responses. Naturally, if you identify a new objective that you would like to meet where you believe none of the other objectives cater for that, you can create it. There's nothing wrong with that. We have actually created a new one under engagement performance that I will show you. But we have provided you with what the standard already gives. So the first column, you don't need to change at all. You can leave as is. Okay. The rest of the document, we have provided you with information, but please note that it is examples. So we've provided you with examples of quality risks, examples of nature and circumstances of the entity, examples of responses. You need to work through that. You need to edit it for your firm. If it's not relevant to your firm, you need to delete it. If there's extra information that you need to put in, you need to do so. Okay. So column B and C works together. For each quality objective, you're going to ask myself, in my firm, what could go wrong? What could go wrong that I'm not going to meet this objective? So you're basically going to turn the objective into a negative. You're going to say, well, the first objective, leadership is responsible and accountable. Leadership may not be responsible and accountable for quality. But why would that happen in my firm? So do a root cause analysis. That reason, the reason why it's not going to happen in your firm, you will put in column C. So you will see in column C, we've told you, evaluate the nature and circumstances of your firm that will influence the risk. So this is basically where you document your firm's circumstances as we saw in document 2.2. So that's why I said you can either document it in 2.2 or here in 2.1. So what is the risk in your firm that management will not accept responsibility? Are you part of a network firm, which could cause a situation where you may not know in your firm who is ultimately responsible? Or is it that you're a sole proprietor and the sole proprietor does not have time to take responsibility for it? So what's the circumstances in your firm? So you can work through these risks. If they are applicable to you, document why. If they're not applicable to you, you can delete them. And if you identify new risks that we have not identified, please put them in. It's Excel. It's as easy as adding a row. We have tried to include as many risks, the ones that we are aware of, the ones that we have identified through consultation with clients, through training sessions. Naturally, you can even take one risk and split it up into more if there are different sides to a risk for your firm. Okay. And then you need to indicate if this risk is likely. Will it have an adverse impact? So is it applicable to your firm? This is now where the standard says we evaluate the risk. If it's likely that it's going to happen, it is applicable. No matter how adverse the impact is going to be, right? If it's likely, even if it is very remote, you have to make it applicable. So if your first answer is yes, right, it will always be applicable. If the likelihood is no, if it's never going to happen in your firm, let's say, for example, there's a risk of not communicating properly to employees. If you don't have employees, that risk will never happen to you. It's not likely. Now you have one of two options. You can either keep the risk and just indicate the fact that it's not likely, or you can delete the risk if you really want to. Okay, it's up to you. Now, please note this document is pre-populated as I am showing it to you right now. So all of these risks that you see, if I quickly zoom out just so that you can see what is completed, all of these risks, all of these responses, they are already pre-populated there. But please note you have to edit it. All of this may not be applicable to your firm. So we try to give some guidance to help you along with the risks, to help you to get to identify some risks, but it may not be applicable. Right. Now, when it comes to the evaluation, the standard says that you can evaluate it in terms of indicating it's low, medium, high, something like that, but you don't have to. And we have found, especially for small firms, to now go and sit and break your head around, is this a low risk or a medium risk or a high risk and why? That's just a waste of time. It's really not necessary. At the end of the day, if a risk is applicable, you're going to implement a response. The response may differ depending on the level of the risk, but that you can just edit when you create the response, right? So for example, if I use employees again, if you only have, well, one employee, one full-time employee, then your risk of employing incompetent employees is very low because you don't take on employees each and every year. So your response to that may be that you have an HR policy, and whenever you need to appoint a new individual, you will evaluate them properly before evaluating them. Whereas for a risk who take in new trainees every single year, that risk could be a lot higher. Right. So that firm, for their response, maybe they have a more formal policy for people to apply, for people to have interviews, for looking for the perfect candidate. So whether the risk is low or high, you will have a response. Your response will just cater for your specific type of risk. So that's why we did not do an evaluation here in terms of low, medium, high. That does not mean that you can't. You can still, if you really want to, you can go and use low, medium, or high. To change it, currently, if you click on the drop-down, it says yes or no. To change it, you just need to go to the lists. You're going to have to add a list for the rating. That will be low, medium, and high. And you then need to use your data validation in Excel to just go and change the list that you want to use for this drop-down. Okay, so you can change it, but you don't have to. The yes and no, it's totally applicable. It's totally allowed. Right. So this is evaluation. Is this risk applicable to you? And why is this risk applicable based on your nature and circumstances? For each of the risks that you then identify is applicable, you need to implement a response. This response is your firm policy. So this column G is the information that will have to be transferred over to your manual if you are creating a manual at the end of the day. Okay. So like I said, for small firms, if you don't want to do a manual, that's totally fine. Then you won't have to transfer it. Then you'll just use column G as your responses, as your policies and procedures. If you want to do a manual, then please make sure that your responses in the Excel in column G agrees to your responses in your manual. Okay. Right. And then in column H, what we've provided you with, you will see it says firm implementation. So for each policy, for each response that you have, you then need to indicate where is the proof for that. So if we had to monitor, if we had to review this, what can we inspect to see that this response was actually implemented? So for an example, if you said that responsibility was assigned to a specific person, maybe there's a document that was signed. Maybe there's minutes of meetings in which this was discussed and decided upon. Maybe there is, an annexure to their contract or whatever the case may be. So where can we prove this? Okay. Now this firm implementation then corresponds with the annexures that we are providing you with. Okay, so if we, for instance, indicate that Annexure 3.1 has been signed, that's one of the documents that we're actually providing you with that you can use. You don't have to use our annexures, right? It's nice. It's a template that you can use. You can edit it for your purposes. You can totally delete it and use your own, but they are there. They are available. Okay. So that's the first part of the risk assessment. That's basically what needs to be done by this year, 15 December 2022. Okay. Now, just to quickly show you where we have added a objective, a quality objective, and just to explain how it works. So you can add quality objectives. We have added one under engagement performance. The very last one under engagement performance, this is not an objective required by the standard. So it deals with the appointment of an EQR, engagement quality reviewer. It's only applicable to certain firms who perform engagements on listed entities and on public interest entities. So if it's not applicable to you, please delete it. Okay. So this is one instance in which we have identified that a new quality objective is necessary. But you're more than welcome. You will see at the bottom we said add more. You can go and add more if you really want to. Right, so once you've done the risk assessment, once you've identified all of your responses that you would like to implement, then you go and take those responses and you put it into your manual. For that purposes, we have provided you with two options that you can use. Right, the ISQM1 compliance implementation manual and the small manual. I'm going to show you both. I'm going to explain the difference and why we have them. So the first one is the quality manual itself, quality management system. This is quite a big document. It has 260 pages, I believe. It's quite a big, bulky document. What this document includes, though, is a lot of guidance that's not necessarily compulsory in your manual. You don't have to have it in your manual, right? For example, the definition of a network firm. If you're not a network firm, you can delete that, which we've taken out of the small one, by the way. Then with regards to guidance, so okay, we have so what we have in the manual, maybe just to show you. For each component, we have the objectives. Right, so there's the objectives from the standard. So the same as what you would have in your Excel sheet. Right. And then we have the policies and procedures. As a firm, what do you need to do? We shall communicate. We will do the following. We will keep the manual on our network. We will communicate the manual at the following instances. So this is your policies and procedures. So everywhere where we indicate that the firm needs to do something, that's basically a policy or a procedure or a response, whatever you wish to call them. And then we have little take action blocks, which is basically just where we give a bit more guidance in terms of what does this all mean practically? What do you need to do to comply? You can delete the take action blocks, or you can just edit it for your firm and keep it in there if you really want. That's up to you. And then we have a link back to the annexures that's applicable for those policies and procedures. Once again, the annexures needs to agree to what is in column H, your firm implementation. And that will then also refer you to the extra documents that we provide. Okay. But this manual then also has a lot of guidance. Right. For example, when it comes to risk assessment, the risk assessment process, we give you guidance as to how to do this risk assessment. We tell you that you need to look at the following sources when you do your risk assessment. You need to consider the following information. Now, this is not necessary to be documented in your manual because it's not part of your system. It's how you created the system. Right? It's the things that you considered when you created the system. This isn't a policy and procedure. This is just input that helped you to evaluate risks. And then we give you a little bit of a take action. Who needs to do what and how do you need to document risks? Basically, what I'm saying is this whole section of risk assessment can be deleted from the manual. You don't actually need to document it to show that you are compliant, because the risk document itself already shows that. So this is just guidance. So in the small manual, you will see we have removed that. You won't see it at all in the small manual. So for those of you who are using the small manual to document your policies and procedures, you may still want to read through the big manual just for that guidance, just to know what are you supposed to do. Right, once again, governance and leadership, we have the objective, and then we have the policies and procedures. What are you going to do to comply with that objective? So everywhere where it says our firm will do, this individual will do, that's a policy and procedure. Yeah. But then a lot of this is just guidance. So for instance, this part here, the individual who is assigned operational responsibility for the quality management process must have a direct line of communication. That's guidance from the standards. That's what the standard requires. Your policy will be that PT, who is assigned responsibility, has a direct line to Yanni, who has ultimate responsibility. So please differentiate between guidance versus your policy. Your policy will be how is your firm implementing this. The same you will see when you get to your ethical requirements. Under ethical requirements, we have a lot of guidance. There's the ethical fundamental principles that needs to be complied with. You don't need to document that in your system. But we're giving it for guidance because you need to use this to assess your risks. What is the risks that you may not comply with these principles? Right, so you can see this manual, 270 pages, really quite a big manual, and not all of it necessarily needs to be documented. We needed to provide a lot of guidance for people to be able to properly do the risk assessment and to properly identify their responses. Right. So to overcome this big bulky manual, what we then also have provided for the smaller firms, or well, a larger firm can use it as well. There's nothing wrong with that. The ISQM small manual. This manual is purely a summary of the policies and procedures. So it doesn't contain any guidance. For guidance, in terms of what should we consider to assess risks, what should we consider if we look at resources, if we look at information and communication, all of that, you need to refer to the big manual, unless you know the standard quite well. So this document, what it looks like is it's literally just a summary. We have the policy for each component. So there's the policy, the objective, the first objective, and then the policies to comply with that objective. So basically, literally, if you look at your Excel sheet, that first objective there, and all the responses that fits with that objective. And then once you've done that one, you go to the next objective. I think this is the next objective, commitment to quality, and then all the responses you have documented under commitment to quality. So this is basically the way it is laid out, is objective, responses, which I think make it a little bit more logical to use, to communicate, and to work through. And then you will see we also have the supporting material for each objective and responses. So objective, responses, who is the responsible individual, what is the supporting material? And then the next one, objective, policies, who's responsible, what's the supporting material? It contains exactly the same content as the big manual in terms of policies and procedures. However, please take note. We have removed the PI requirements, public interest entities. We have removed any and all network requirements, and we have removed EQR requirements. So that's why we actually say it is for small firms. I thought I may have put a list in here of what was removed. I see I did not. Okay, so please just take note. Those items are removed. They're not documented here. No. So network, EQR, public interest entities. We have removed that from this small manual. So as a big firm, if you want to use a small manual, that's totally fine. Just make sure to then include those things into the manual from the big manual. Yeah. And then please note, we also have a document, a list of all the annexures. So people have asked, so we have made some changes to the annexures. So some of the old annexure numbers may not be valid anymore. So there was a bit of confusion regarding the annexures. So we did a summary of all the annexures, right? Which one of them are internal documents that's not provided by Probita? Which one of them has been changed? So maybe if you see somewhere there is a reference to confirmation of the firm's understanding of policies and procedures. It should be changed in the manual, but you know, it may happen, things fall through the cracks. So if at any stage you see a reference to this type of annexure and you can't find it, it has been changed. Yeah. So for instance, you may see this old annexure 5.7 was replaced by 5.1. Old annexure 5.8 was replaced by 5.2. And then some of the annexures we are still busy with, especially the engagement letters and the withdrawal letters, just making sure legally they are correct. Okay. But it's not the end of the world because you should have engagement letters. If you don't have engagement letters at this stage, that's a bit of a problem. Hopefully you do have templates that you can work with in the meantime. They will be uploaded in due course. Okay, so here and there you will see a few. The EQR, I do believe some of them are uploaded. We're just checking them to see if they are all correct for ISQM2. And then some of the documents are not Probita documents, like the Psycho Guide, the IRBA Guide. So we're just referring you back to those guides. So if you're unsure about any of the annexures, check this document. And I apologize if, as I said, some reference has slipped through in the manual where the reference is wrong. Please just correct it for us on your side. Okay, so that's the manual. The big one, the small one. Right. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we have the annexures. So as I said, the resources, the implementation, the proof that these things have been done. So for instance, under governance and leadership, there we give you an explanation of all the documents that we do provide you with. And I also indicate if a document may not be necessary. For instance, if you can replace it by your own minutes of meetings. Or if you're a sole proprietor, I do indicate this will not be necessary. Right. So you can look, there's some guidance there. You can download the documents on the right-hand side. They're either Word or Excel. It's just a template. You need to edit them. You need to put your company letterhead and company logos on. You need to be happy with them. And then naturally you can add comments. I see we already have some comments, so you're more than welcome. Let's say there's a specific document you need, but we haven't provided it. You're more than welcome to find out. Do we perhaps have a template? Can we create a template? If we can upload it. We really want this product to evolve as we go on. So where you may identify extra needs on your side to implement quality and we have not provided documents, just let us know. And then if we have a template or if we have the capacity to create one, we can always add it. Yeah. So to implement, you're going to ensure that throughout the year, all of these responses are implemented as required. And then at the end of the year, you need to monitor. Well, you can monitor throughout the year as well. So let me just explain to you the monitoring process. Under the monitoring section, you will see we have some documents there, right? So the first thing is you need to identify what monitoring activities are you going to perform. So monitoring activity is anything that you do during the year that can provide you with feedback on the workings of your system of quality management. So it's not just a checklist approach of, did I implement all of the responses? It's any activity that can tell you there was an issue, like someone that reviews your files, an IRBA review, right? EQR reviews that you perform, communication that you receive from regulatory authorities, inspection that you do internally on your engagement files that could indicate that there are problems. Performance reviews that you do over your employees that indicate that someone did not do their job as they were supposed to, maybe because there's a quality issue. So we provide you with some examples of how you can perform monitoring. You need to go and decide this year already, which of these are you going to utilize? We give you guidance on what this monitoring activity is, and then you're going to say, how are you going to do this? Are you going to do it periodically or at a specific point in, periodically at a specific point in time, or will this be a routine process that you're going to do ongoing throughout the year? And then you're going to allocate it to a specific person or division or group of people. So someone needs to be given this responsibility to say during the year, you need to go and do this. So these first 4 columns needs to be completed now already. Now the actual monitoring will only take place next year. So the actual results of the monitoring will only be documented next year. And that's now from column E. So you will document if a monitoring activity was performed, the date that it was performed. You will refer back to the supporting evidence of this monitoring activity. Maybe it is a report from IRBA themselves, a report from the EQR, the actual performance reviews itself, right? Where did you do this or how was it done? And then you will document the outcome. Did this monitoring activity identify and indicate any deficiencies? So you will document that. We have identified that in all our audit files, documentation of ethics seems to be an issue. We don't document the ethics properly. So that's the outcome. The IRBA review has indicated that. Is it an engagement specific deficiency? That would probably lead to indicate that the report was not appropriate. In this instance, no, we just didn't document the ethics properly. If it's an engagement specific item that indicated for a specific engagement, their report was incorrect, you will need to respond to that. You will need to take action. Otherwise, you can just say not applicable. Right. And then, ladies and gentlemen, you need to evaluate this outcome. And that is once again done on the risk assessment document. So all of these deficiencies that you have identified, you then need to go back to the risk document and tie them back to a objective or to a risk. Okay, so let's say, for example, I'm talking about the ethics one. Through the IRBA reviews, we've identified that ethics isn't properly documented on file. Okay. So there we go. We actually have a risk for that. Threats may not be properly identified and documented. And then there is all our responses. So now we are looking at the monitoring side. So there's the monitoring side. What monitoring activity did you identify this issue? That is a drop down. Let me just, zoom out a little bit again because my cells are quite big. So it's a drop down. And basically what we've done there is we've included all the monitoring activities as per our list. If you've done new monitoring activities, you can add it to the list. There on the list sheet, there is the list of monitoring activities, and you can just add new ones if you want to. Okay. So in our example, it's an IRBA review. So through the IRBA review, we've identified the following. And now you document the finding. This is basically a copy and paste from 8.1. Okay. So in 8.1, what happened? What went wrong? Ethics are not documented properly on file, including safeguards or whatever the case may be. Now we ask ourselves, what type of deficiency is this? And once again, it comes from a drop down. So the standard gives you types of deficiencies. The standard says it's either an objective that wasn't met, or a risk that wasn't identified, or a response that wasn't implemented. In our example, we did comply with ethics. So the objective was met because the objective is fulfill our responsibilities, and we did. We just didn't document it properly. So the response was not implemented. So the response was not implemented. Or maybe we didn't have that response at all. Maybe we didn't have a response to say that we should document ethics. Maybe we don't have a standard document for that. Then we need to go and evaluate the root cause. Why did this happen? Is it because the individual didn't know that the document existed? Is it because we don't have a document at all? Is it because they don't know how to complete the document? Because depending on the reason, our remedial action might change. If there is no document, our remedial action will be to have a template document. If there is a document and people just didn't know about it, then our remedial action will be communicate the fact that there is a template document. If they just didn't complete the template document properly, maybe our remedial action needs to be training on the template document. So why did this happen? There is no template document. Then they ask, is it severe? Is it pervasive? So this is for you to evaluate. Severe means it's a huge issue. It's quite big. It could cause a lot of problems in your quality. It could lead to quite deficient quality. In this instance, we did comply with ethics. We just can't prove it very nicely. Right. So it's not that severe. Once again, you can here go and say low, medium, high, or you can say yes or no. It's up to you. And depending on how severe or not severe it is, your response may need to be implemented immediately, or maybe you can say, well, next year we'll correct it going forward, right? So once again, your remedial action and how you implement your remedial action will be impacted on whether or not it is severe or not. And then pervasive means, does it impact the whole system of quality management? So a pervasive item would be, for instance, if we do not communicate properly. If it's a communication issue, that could be pervasive, because it can mean that other instances in our quality system was also not communicated properly. If they don't know about the template document for ethics, they'll probably not know about the template documents for everything else. So if it is pervasive, then your remedial action may not only be over this one specific risk, you may need to go and implement remedial actions over other instances in your system of quality management as well. And then you'll implement your remedial action, create a template document. And then your remedial action will need to then impact your risk assessment for next year. So here is what I'm going to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the risk assessment document. Please, you need to copy it for every single year. You need a separate risk assessment document for every single year. Why am I saying that? Because this year, right, you document a specific risk, you document a specific response. Next year, when we monitor it, we document the monitoring activities and we see there's a problem. So now we need to go back to our responses and we need to change our responses. But then we need to monitor it again. And I don't want you to override each year's monitoring procedures and remedial actions because you need to be able to prove that you've done it. Right. So please, once you've done the monitoring process, create a new copy of this document for the next year, and then go and change the risk assessment and archive the old one because you want to keep proof of these monitoring activities. And that is the monitoring process. And that's basically your ISQM1 system then. So we have the risk assessment, the manual, and then all the extra supporting documents and the monitoring process.